Welcome back to another convivial episode of Talking Lamar. Today, I'm talking about what we did for excitement and entertainment at our house. Let's get to it.
What are you talking about?
What are you talking about?
Sorry, I forgot what I was talking about.
What are you talking about?
I am talking to you.
That's just what I was talking about.
It's Talking Lamar.
When I was still a little kid and we were still living in the single wide, and my brother Troy was at home, he was still in high school. Things are pretty low key. There's not much going on, and we lived about 12 miles out of town and in the country. Back then, there was 3 channels, black and white. That was it. Closest neighbors, one side was about a quarter mile, and on the other side, it's about half a mile. So it didn't take much to get our attention because we were just sort of sitting around. So anytime that we heard a siren, oh, buddy, we took off. We went after it. Now, I'm not talking about hear it and look around and think about it. No need to discuss it. We all just jumped up and took off out the door. Mama was driving. Daddy was in the passenger side, unless he was drunk. And that was normally 2 days during the week, like Monday and Thursday, or Tuesday or Monday and Wednesday and Tuesday and Thursday. It just depended. He never did 2 days in a row, but he always did 2 days during the week and 1 day on the weekend. That might be Friday or Saturday. Never on Sunday, because that was when me and Mama and Troy went to church. Now, Daddy didn't go himself, but he just made sure to get up, make sure we went to church. He was real good at that. So when we heard a siren, if he was drunk, we just left him in the chair and took off. I rode shotgun if that was the case. If Troy wasn't at home, it might be just me and Mama. But if Troy was home, I rode in the back seat. And the siren, it could be an ambulance, it could be a fire truck, or it could be the sheriff. My mama could tell which it was by just the sound. As we was getting in the car, she would call it. And very seldom was she wrong. I mean, she usually had it. And so sometimes they would pass the house going down the road, and they were very easy to follow. But sometimes they took a road about a half a mile up from our place, and they could go in either direction. So when that happened, we'd have to track them down. Sometimes we lost them, sometimes we found them, but we'd ride around for a while hunting them to see what was going on. And we'd take an educated guess, and we'd go down a road, and we might think they took. And if it was daytime or it hadn't got completely dark, we could tell if they took a dirt road, we could see the dust. But at night, it was really hard to see unless our headlights caught some of the dust. So every time was not, but it was still something to do. We're out riding around. And if it was an ambulance and we didn't know them where the house it went to, we would just pull off the side of the road and we'd roll down the windows and just sit there and see what was going on, which is morbid if you think about it, I'm sure. But if we knew the people, then we'd pull it right up in the yard with the ambulance. And we'd, my mom would get out and go see if, she could do anything for them. And if somebody was going to go to the hospital, Mama would offer to either we would stay with the kids or whoever if it needed to, or we'd take them home with us and keep them until they figured out what was going on at the hospital. Now, if somebody was dead, and that happened every once in a while, then my mama, and if we knew them, somebody's dead, we know them, my mama would go in and sit with whoever, was like, if it was a husband was dead, she'd go in and sit with the wife and whatever. And I was not a big fan of that because if somebody was dead, then I'm going to be stuck there for a long time. And I know that sounds sort of cold and selfish.
You were a kid.
But I'm a kid.
Yeah.
I'm a kid. So if somebody is dead, then you have to go in and sit down and shut up. I mean, you can't be playing freeze tag out in the yard if somebody's dead. That's just, my mom wouldn't go for that. But if it wasn't cold and we were stuck like that, and I do this sometimes too, if we would go visit some people that didn't have kids or anything, and if I didn't want to go inside to visit, I could stay out in the car. And I could stay in the car and play. And I know it doesn't sound like there's much going on in the car, but think about it. The car, it is a magical place. Okay? Because in a car, you can do anything in the car, especially at night, and nobody can see you acting like a fool. You can do whatever you want to in the car, So many possibilities. Because you had the big front seat, and a big back seat because it's a 4-door car. Right off the bat, you can crawl, you can jump back and forth from front to back, from back to front. I mean, you've got the steering wheel. You can pretend you're driving the car and chasing bad guys, or you're being chased by bad guys and you're turning the wheel. And actually, you could shift the gears too, but you had to be careful because if you left it in neutral and you was a couple of times I had the car roll on me a little bit, and I never did hit nothing, but I'd have to get it stopped and whatever. My mama, when she get back to the car and she said, "This don't look like where I parked the car," she'd be upset about that. But there's all kinds of things a kid can do. You're getting you get up in the back window and you're getting shot by a bad guy. So then you fall off of the back window into the back seat, down on the floorboard, across that big hump in the floor. I mean, the whole death scene. I mean, it was an extravaganza, And
Lamar, I am so hearing every bit of this. My father you guys would probably know what it was. It was some sort of fancy collectible Chevy from the 50s that he bought that he was going to restore. He never restored it. And the plan was he would restore it and my mom would be allowed to drive it, but he never restored it and he never wanted my mother to be allowed to drive. He was that kind of dude, right?
Oh,
but it sat before we moved to Wyoming. It sat in our driveway and you'd have thought it was a Princess Playhouse. Everything Lamar just said. It was a rocket ship. It was a cottage in the woods. It could be anything. I totally hear you.
Whatever your imagination could come up with, it was unbelievable. Now, if it's been a while that I've had my adventure in the back seat, back and forth or whatever, Max, you'll understand this. In a 4-door car in the back seat, the seat itself, you reach up under there and pull it and the seat comes out. You know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. So you could pull the seat out and you could flip it up and look for loose change and whatever might have fell out of somebody's pocket. I mean, you could find all kinds of things under there. I mean, you could find some candy, but it was suspect and you didn't want to mess with that too much. I tried a couple of pieces of that. That never worked out. But, you can never know what you might find. And it was very, very cool. And if I was out there for a good while, I'd be thinking about a snack. And so what I would do is I'd get in the glove compartment and there would always be 2 or 3 ketchup packages in there that you could open up and you could eat ketchup.
Oh my God.
I mean, I could stay in a car all day. I mean, I really could, because as long as it's not hot, as long as you're not hot and stuffy. I mean, it was a great time.
Remember the Sopranos episode where Paulie and Christopher screwed up trying to whack the Russian gangster and they got lost in the Pine Barrens and all they had to eat was ketchup packets? That's you. That was you. You were eating ketchup packets and you weren't even a stranded gangster. You were choosing to eat ketchup packets.
We would be going somewhere. We'd be going somewhere and eating food in the car because we were really big on pulling up, and not going in eating food in the car. My mom would open up the dash. She said, "I need some ketchup for these French fries." And she'd ramble around in there and she'd go, "Have you been eating the ketchup packets again?" Well, I mean, they're there. I don't know what else to tell you, but it was a real adventure. I mean, it really, really is. And, now the fire truck situation, that was a completely different story. That didn't happen very often, but when it did, we certainly were not the only peoples there. Now, some people other than us followed the ambulances, but now if a fire truck answered a fire within 4 miles of the house, I mean, everybody's headed that way, to see, is it somebody we know? Can we help them out? I mean, or just, and when it gets right down to it, if there's nothing else can be done, it's really interesting to watch fire people fight a fire. I mean, it's some excitement,
I wonder if this still happens at all, but with hundreds and hundreds of television channels and streaming and the internet and your phone, why do I get the feeling nobody jumps in the car to go watch a fire? What do you think?
No, I don't think so. Max, what do you think?
I don't know. I got distracted on this end by something that was going on. So I'm sorry
No,
that I
don't worry
can't
about that.
respond to that.
Well, don't worry about it. But no, I
Max's
think you're right.
equipment is on fire, so he is watching a fire.
Nothing too much to get excited about.
Listen, Max he's the one that keeps this whole thing going. So we don't really need to distract him very often. But I do think you're right. There's so much to watch. There's so much going on. And you know what? Think about this. In the average household today, all of a sudden an ambulance or a fire truck goes down the road. The mom and dad jump up, they go in and say, grab the kids, let's go follow the ambulance. They're playing video games. They're on the phone talking to they don't care. They don't care. But when you had nothing, I mean, especially at night. I mean, I was outside playing all the time. It's nighttime. I mean, if they're watching something on TV that I don't care nothing about, then that's about it. I can read a book, but I mean, other than that, so ambulances and stuff was big action. When we moved across the road, we built a house and moved out of the trailer. I remember my mom, she found the world of scanners where you could listen to the police.
Oh, yeah.
She loved that. She loved to listen to and most of the stuff she's hearing is going on uptown or whatever, but she loved listening to a scanner. I mean, she really,
That's
really
addictive.
did.
That is an addictive thing.
Oh, yeah. So, and now every once in a while, the sheriff's card come by. They may be in a high-speed chase or whatever. And we were morbid people, evidently, because if somebody had a wreck, phones would start ringing, and everybody would ride to where they, if it was a bad wreck, and seems like there were a lot of wrecks back then. And it seems like when somebody wrecked, especially out in the country, they rolled that car and it went across a field. I mean, most of the time they're driving fast and they jump the ditch and things start rolling. And I can't even count how many car wrecks we went to where the car was just, I mean, it was crazy. Sometimes people got really hurt. Sometimes people died. I mean, that kind of stuff. But everybody would, go look at it. I mean,
your country rural car wrecks are often horrific because of the speed. Everything you just said. In out west, it was speed, ditches, and livestock. Not to mention wildlife. But and it's dark, and if it's real rural, you don't have a lot of like street lights or ambient light. You can be barreling down the road pretty good. Something's in front of you. Maybe you slam on brakes, you lose control. You're not wrong, Lamar. Those country car wrecks are bad.
Yeah. There's no bump ups. And most of the time it's a single car wreck. It's not two cars hitting each other. It's a single car that goes off the road. And, I mean.
Hits a tree, hits a fence.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't know. But everybody was drawn to it. Now, we had some woods that backed up to our property. We lived on 110 acres. And so we had a fish pond across the road, which once we built the house, it was down back behind the house, but it was on the back side of the property. It was a pretty good sized fish pond. I mean, we had it stocked. You could fish, no problem. And so one night, me and my mom, we were doing some night fishing. We'd go down there sometimes at night and we'd set up a lantern or whatever and just, and fish. And like you could catch some stuff at night. We didn't go out we didn't have a boat or nothing like that. We just always fish from the shore. So we're out there night fishing. And all of a sudden we noticed that if we looked right over the hill from the fish pond, you could see some lights and some fire. It was like lanterns and there was some fire going on in the woods. And it wasn't on our property. And you could hear some people talking, but you couldn't really make out what they were saying. And so when we got back home, Mama said something to Daddy about it. And she said, somebody's running something going on back there. She said, I think they might be running a still back there. And my daddy's like, look, it ain't on our land, ain't our business, And so a week or so later, one morning, my mom said, Daddy was already gone to work. And Mama got me up. She said, get the fishing poles. We're going back to the pond. So we got the fishing poles, but I noticed she put the, not hers, but the family pistol, she put it in her back pocket. And it was not that unusual if we were going down to the pond, because could be snakes, could be something like that. And sometimes we'd go down there and there'd be strangers that we didn't know would be fishing at our pond without permission. And she'd have to ask them to leave. I mean, if we knew somebody, they would always call us and ask if they go fishing. But if, you walk up and there's just a perfect stranger down there fishing, that's not what you want. And so my mom always just had the pistol in her back pocket just in case. So we threw the line in a few times, and Mama said, throw your line out, lay the pole down. We're going to see what them lights were. And I'm thinking, should we be doing this? But hell, she's my mama, so here we go. So we crossed over the fence, and we went what I guess now was probably 50 yards. And Mama said, if it is a steal, nobody's going to be down there in the morning, because they were cooking at night, evidently. But she said, need to be quiet just in case. So we ease up to this small clearing among the trees, and you could smell it before we could see it. It had a sort of a sickly sweet smell, but it also had a little bit of a bread smell, but not in a good way. You know what I'm saying? You could smell it.
Yeah, like a bit of a sour smell, like a sour yeasty smell. Yeah.
It was, and I guess the reason it smelled like bread, I guess it was the yeast. I guess we get down there, and sure enough, it's a full-fledged steal. They were 50-gallon drums. There were some smaller drums, and they had pipes going back and forth. And between them, there was some copper tubing, and it was very confusing. It was just a bunch of stuff. But my mom, she said,
she knew
it's a
what
steal.
she was saying.
Yeah. And they had some cases of mason jars, and they had some boxes of gallon jugs. They had a few chairs sitting around under a tarp. Now, over the trees, it hung a tarp up there in case it was raining or whatever, I guess. So we looked it over. We didn't hang around very long, because Mama said, we need to get back home and let's move on. Let's get out of here. And I wasn't supposed to say anything. And I never said nothing to Daddy. I never said, because he'd have been ticked if, we'd have told him we went down there. So I never said anything else about it. But I remember a few months later, we were fishing, and the curiosity got the best of my mama. She said, let's go check this out again. And so we walked down there, and the place was all busted up. And I said, what happened? And she called it the GBI, which now I know meant the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. She said, the GBI goes around from time to time, and they'll check, or they'll get a tip on a steal or whatever, and they'll just come in and, they'll chop it up. They chopped up, made holes in all the drums and all that, so you couldn't do nothing with it. So, but I've saw 2 or 3 steals when I was a kid. We'd find out about one, we'd go look at it.
That is fascinating to me, because that's real specific to where you grew up. I'm pretty sure that Max never stumbled across a whiskey still.
No, I did not.
I sure never stumbled across one in the wilds. That is nowadays you'd be just as likely to find an illegal grow operation or a meth coke operation.
Yeah. I imagine, right? I'm sure.
Yeah,
I'm sure that's
as you
would
would a whiskey still. So, these moonshiners were not on your property; they were adjacent to it.
They were on the backside. They were adjacent to it. We had a pasture fence that was on the line, because we had cows and everything. So cows went across the road. Cows had all of that. So we had cows and all of that. And then when we built a house, we fenced in enough. We had about a 2-acre yard, and then the house sat there. But everything around us was a fence with the cows in it. So, but anything on the other side of the fence belonged to somebody else.
So, Lamar, I'm going to put on my anthropologist hat and ask you to explain to folks that are listening to this, who do not understand why you'd go to all the trouble to have a whiskey still when you got a liquor store and it's not prohibition anymore, and you could go buy you some fancy store brand liquor. Tell people why it is that moonshine is still a thing.
Well, there are still states where different counties are either wet or dry. And so where we lived in Hart County, it was dry. I mean, it was dry. That's why me riding across the bridge to South Carolina, because there was a beer joint over there, and he was a bootlegger. and he would buy liquor from a store, and he would keep it at his house. And then when you went over to the beer joint, he'd go up to his house and bring back the liquor and put it in your car. But way before this ever happened, back in Prohibition days, people learned how to make liquor, and they make it with a still. And they do sour mash and corn, and they heat it up. And I don't understand the whole process, but they're like chemists almost. These are like chemists that can't read or write. I mean, they have got this down to a science. Now, when you go to Nashville or a lot of different places, every strip mall's got what they call the moonshine. This is a moonshine. That stuff right there. I can't even. All they've got is a T-shirt because the stuff is terrible. It's terrible. It's not even drinkable. Real moonshine is very smooth. Got a little kick to the end. But I mean, it's very, very smooth. It's very easy to drink if somebody knows how to make it. And
so Lamar, I've had your friends. That was your friend who made that moonshine?
Yes.
So I've had store-bought moonshine and I've had homemade moonshine. I've had some moonshine that tasted like kerosene, and I've had some moonshine that kind of was okay, but it felt like you were going to burn the lining off the roof of your mouth. But Lamar handed me a mason jar full of, it was as clear as a diamond.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, this is the best moonshine you will ever drink. And man, that was some sipping shine.
Yeah,
oh my God, I cannot even believe what a hillbilly I am. But that was some good sipping shine.
So what does is it comparable to any other thing that you can buy? I mean, as far as taste?
I tell you what it'd be comparable to, Max, and you'll understand this. Really high end, really good high end vodka, or for that matter, really good high end tequila, but especially vodka. Good high end vodka that you don't have to pour orange juice or grapefruit, nothing. You can just take it and sip it, and it's very drinkable. I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's not burning you. You're not gasping for breath. You know what I'm talking about?
And it's not alcohol forward. So the moonshine that Lamar's friend makes, it tastes like you're sipping on moonlight. It is smooth, and it has a really crisp, clean, diamond-like flavor. And the alcohol is in the back, not in the front. You could get into trouble on that. That I was
because it doesn't assault your taste buds. It does not hit your taste buds and just go crazy. It's not. And you know, there's an art to it. There is an art to it, and these places that are taking advantage of this of the commercial stuff, I mean, they're just turning it out. And I mean, it's fine. It's fine. If you don't know any different, then that's fine. But, you know, and back then, even though it was past the moonshine in days, I mean, Prohibition was over with, we lived in a dry county. So you couldn't buy a beer, you couldn't buy a liquor, you could buy no alcohol in our county. So you had two options. People that bootlegged, which means they would go somewhere like cross over into South Carolina, and they would buy like cases of half pints of liquor, and then they would keep them at their house, and people would pull up and they'd pay, you know, and they'd charge you basically, you know, an extra $5 a bottle or whatever over the top of you driving, you know, into another state or whatever. Or there's people that made their own liquor, and you go to their house and do it that way. And so moonshining was really still pretty big when I was a kid. It was very easy to find.
I think there are still people that are shining, and they're but it's artisanal. It's like what your friend makes, and you can sell it for a premium because it's not the same. A really good moonshine just isn't the same as something else that you would buy at the store.
No.
So what's interesting, because there are people that think, you know, well, if we shouldn't legalize marijuana, for example. But here's the deal. You know what invented organized crime in America? Prohibition. Max and I did an episode of True Weird Stuff called Lady Hooch Hunter. It's one of our favorite episodes we ever did. And it's set during Prohibition. Prohibition was the beginning of the Dixie Mafia, the Italian Mafia, organized crime rackets and racketeering. Because you cannot legislate morality, which is what Prohibition was about. It was, you know, the demon rum and temperance and Carrie Nation and all that. The country tried so hard to legislate morality, And what ends up happening is you create a black market and an avenue as wide as can be for crime, because people are going to do what people are going to do.
That's right.
And
they're going to find a way.
They're going to find a way. And the Moonshiners in the South, if you've ever read any of Diana Gabaldon's Outlander books or watched the Outlander series on, I think it's on Starz, the Scottish immigrants who came over to the United States, like before the War for Independence and then after, one of the things they missed was the whiskey that they had left behind at home. And so they began making their own whiskey out of corn and grain. And that, the early moonshiners were people that just missed what they were getting at home. And then they discovered that their new neighbors in the New World enjoyed it real good too.
And it's clear because it's not aged in a barrel, right?
Yeah. It's not. It comes. They bottle it right when they get through with it. Yeah.
Mm-mm-mm. So when was the last time you knew of a still getting busted, Lamar? I can't even remember.
It's been a long time. Now they've got it to a point. I think it's in this state too. You can set up a still at your house and you can make like 4 gallons. There's a limit to what you can have personal consumption. It's like in some of the states with marijuana, you can grow a personal amount.
Yeah,
you just can't sell. Yeah, you can. Yeah, and I think it's still legal here as far as that goes. But no, I hadn't heard of. I mean, there used to be a big deal about people, because the biggest problem with moonshiners, what made the government mad is they're not paying any taxes on that. Regular alcohol pays taxes. It's always it's the government wanting taxes. That's the problem. They're getting cheated out of tax money.
In Prohibition, it was the Department of the Treasury,
right,
that prosecuted bootleggers and moonshiners and speakeasies and organized crime because they were not getting the revenue. It was the IRS and the Treasury Department that was the law of the long arm of the law back then. And that's how you got the nickname, the revenuers were coming after you to bust up your still. So isn't it interesting that even in Prohibition, when, we were just this country was going to be, teetotaling, that it was about the money more than it was about the crime.
Yeah, always about the money.
Always about the money.
So, but that was my entertainment situation there when we only had 3 channels. Now that we got more channels, I guess.
I got another question about Mrs. Richardson, about Mama with the pistol in her back pocket.
The house pistol. What did you call it?
The family pistol.
we only had we had shotguns and stuff like that. We only had one pistol. Yeah.
Okay.
Max, I'm going to remind you that this is the same lady that would come home from work and have to breathe in and out of a paper bag to keep her nerves calm.
Not sure we want her armed, but go
she's
ahead. I know.
She's grabbing Lamar and going out at night looking for the moonshiners. Like, no wonder she was a little worked up.
This is in addition to his father waking him up in the middle of the night to take him to the bootleggers on a school night. I mean... as Lamar always says, whatever's normal is normal to you.
Yeah, it's funny when I make these podcasts and I look back and I go, when I keep saying this out loud, this seems sort of crazy.
we need to create an item. It'll be free. We won't charge for it. It'll be a brown paper sack with Doris Richardson's face on it that says, "Here you go, Mom, deep breaths." And we'll just give it out to listeners that are stressed. You can breathe into Doris's bag. Like, oh my God. So Lamar, it's not until you say these things out loud that it occurs to you that this was not how everybody was rolling.
Yes. Okay. And I got to be honest. When I first started telling these stories on the podcast, I thought, well, this is only going to last about 2 weeks because I don't have any really crazy stuff. Well, hell.
It's all crazy, my friend.
Every time I'm making one of these right in the middle, it'll make me think of something else. And I say, well, let me make a note of that because we'll do that the next time. So evidently, I did have a crazy ass life. I really did. But
you had a really colorful life. And I've always felt I used to be jealous of people who had like what I thought were quote unquote normal families, But they were bored. They got no stories.
Oh yeah, they got nothing to tell. They got nothing to tell. Listen, with the way I was raised, I've never been boring at a cocktail party. I'll go ahead and say. So, all right. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this episode.
So tell the people again that the store-bought moonshine, you got to get a hookup. Somebody with a still.
You got to get it. You got to find somebody that knows somebody. That's what you got to find. Because once let me tell you this: once you go there, there's no going back. You can't go back to one of them places that's got a T-shirt. You won't nothing to do with it. No,
you'll never drink store-bought moonshine again. I'll tell you that.
Well, that's this episode's peek into the family life of this little young redneck. I thank y'all for taking the time out of your day. You could be doing a lot of other things, but you're listening to me, and I really appreciate it. We've had a great time. Hope you did. If so, don't keep it to yourself. Tell somebody you like. Tell everybody you hate. I don't care. Just tell somebody about the Talking Lamar podcast, and they'll probably be eternally grateful. Now, you'll never know till you try. Also, try out Sheri's True Weird podcast. True Weird Stuff podcast. I love that. I keep forgetting that. That's all right. Because I promise you, if you think this is funny, her stuff is amazingly weird, and it's so good. You'd love it. There's more to come, so don't stop now, because y'all know I hate a quitter. Join us for the next episode of Talking Lamar. Hey, we want to hear from y'all. Email us or go on the Bob and Sheri app. Look down at the bottom. Click on the microphone. Start talking. We want to hear what you think. You can also call 844-52-SHERI, and you can leave a message if you're old school.
And one more thing, and that is, if you're listening to this as it's dropped, don't forget you can make submissions to Lamar's cookbook on our website at bobandsheri.com.
Yes, the cookbook is coming, so get your recipes in, and we might choose yours to be in the book. Until then,